before stories were written, before kings carved their names into stone, before maps divided continents into lines and borders, humans stood in open landscapes and looked upward. They watched the sun rise in the east and fall in the west. They watched stars carve circles through the night sky. They learned that the heavens moved with rhythm and meaning, and eventually one question rose within them. How do we reach closer to the sky? The answer did not come from metal tools or written plans. It came from imagination. Someone picked up the first stone and placed it on another. Others followed. Soon the ground began to rise. What grew was not shelter and not storage. It was intention made visible. A monument. A shape understood across cultures that never met. A pyramid. Today we assume that this idea began in Egypt. Desert sands make it easy to believe that the first great attempt to touch the sky rose beside the Nile. Yet long before those iconic limestone giants stood in the heat of the Sahara, other civilizations were already building upward. Terraces carved into mountains in Indonesia, platform pyramids rising from the Peruvian desert, structures older than our assumptions, older than our textbooks, possibly older than the memory of civilization itself. This book is not about disproving Egypt. It is about widening the lens. It is about recognizing that genius does not belong to one river or one kingdom. Genius belongs to humanity. The stones tell a different story. A story of invention without contact. A story of architecture without empires. A story of belief strong enough to move Earth. We once thought that civilization began in a single place. Now the evidence shows that it ignited in many places at once. The first pyramid is not where we expected, because we were only looking in one direction. To understand the true beginning of monumental architecture, we must return to a world that existed before history, a world shaped by rising seas, forgotten coastlines, and ideas powerful enough to outlive those who imagined them. Let us begin. For generations, we have carried a comfortable belief about the origin of human monument building. Ask almost anyone where pyramids began, and the answer arrives instantly. Egypt, golden desert sands, kings wrapped in linen, great structures rising toward the sky like frozen beams of sunlight. The image is so deeply rooted in our imagination that it feels less like a conclusion and more like a memory. Pyramids equal Egypt. Egypt equals pyramids. History settled, except that history was never settled, it was only simplified. The step pyramid of Giza in the royal necropolis of Saqqara became the symbol of this belief. Built around the years 2667 to 2648, before the Common Era, it towers in 6 stacked layers of stone. It was the first time the Egyptians attempted a monumental structure at this scale. The project was guided by Imhotep, a name that still echoes through the history of engineering. He was an architect, a priest, and eventually worshipped as a god of wisdom. The pyramid he designed is considered the earliest pyramid in Egypt, and the foundation of a legacy that would lead to the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza. The presence of carved writing, known as hieroglyphs, allowed archaeologists to trace the pyramid directly to the reign of King Giza. In the world of archaeology, written evidence is powerful. It anchors dates, it confirms builders, it provides a narrative. Egypt had writing, Egypt had stone, Egypt had organization. Therefore, Egypt must have been first. And so, for more than 100 years, historians repeated the story. The first pyramid is Egyptian. Civilizations learned from Egypt. Monumental architecture spread outward from the Nile. This belief was repeated so confidently that even questioning it felt like heresy. It appeared in children's textbooks, in documentaries, in the quiet voice of tour guides who pointed across the desert and said, "This is the beginning." But science does not respect certainty. Science demands evidence. As newer dating techniques improved, as radiocarbon sampling matured, and as archaeologists began documenting sites far from the Nile, something unexpected began to surface. Ancient cultures on other continents had been building large pyramid-shaped structures around the same time, and in some surprising cases earlier. This discovery did not begin with grand announcements. It began quietly, with soil samples taken from forgotten ruins in distant river valleys, with fragments of reed baskets and burned plant fibers preserved beneath layers of sediment. Archaeologists who specialized in South America sent their results to laboratories. The numbers returned raised eyebrows. A cluster of monumental structures in the Supe Valley of Peru appeared older than Giza. At first, the data was questioned. Perhaps the samples were contaminated. Perhaps the dates referred to earlier organic matter that happened to be buried on site. Yet, as excavations continued and the sampling strategy became more refined, the results pointed consistently to the same conclusion. The monumental complexes in Peru belonged to a civilization that emerged around 3,000 to 2,600 years before the Common Era. In other words, the people of the Supe Valley were building large platform pyramids right around the same time Egypt was experimenting with its first stone pyramid. This should have changed everything, and yet it barely made a ripple. The reason was simple and unspoken. The pyramids in Peru did not resemble the sharp-sided geometry of Giza. They were not pointed. They were stepped and flat on top. They did not fit the idea of what a pyramid was supposed to look like. So the world did not care. The narrative remained unchanged. Egypt is first, but the earth has a long memory, and the soil does not lie. As archaeologists began to look beyond Egypt and beyond Peru, evidence emerged from yet another unexpected location. On a remote mountaintop in Indonesia sits a place known as Gunung Padang. To the untrained eye, it looks like a hill of scattered basalt stones, but beneath the surface, layers of man-made terraces form a massive stepped structure. Ground-penetrating instruments and radiocarbon samples suggest that the upper layers were shaped around 2,500 years before the Common Era. Beneath them lie older terraces that date to around 7,000 years before the Common Era. Deeper still are core layers that some studies propose may extend as far back as 20,000 to 25,000 years before the Common Era. These earliest dates are debated intensely and require more verification, but they open a possibility that challenges our understanding of how early humans were capable of organizing large-scale construction. The mention of such ancient dates shocks the imagination. Did humans build monumental structures before agriculture was widespread? What kind of society existed that could mobilize the coordinated labor needed for terraces, for planning, for shaping stone? The idea does not fit easily into current timelines of civilization development. And yet, the data is there, waiting to be confirmed, waiting to be understood. The more archaeologists look, the more examples appear. Structures in China, platform mounds in North America, terraced ceremonial architecture across the Pacific. Over and over again, the same geometric idea is repeated. A wide base, a narrowing top, a platform that ascends a little closer to the sky. It seems that the pyramid is not a cultural invention, it is a human one. The assumption that pyramids began in Egypt was built not from evidence alone, but from visibility. Egyptian pyramids survived. They are tall enough to command the horizon, precise enough to defy erosion, and wrapped in the poetic aura of pharaohs and gold. Meanwhile, other pyramids collapsed, became buried, or hid beneath vegetation. Our attention followed what was easiest to see. But archaeology does not favor the loud, it favors the buried. The truth is not that Egypt invented pyramids. The truth is that multiple civilizations, separated by oceans and unaware of one another, arrived at similar ideas because they faced similar challenges. They needed structures that could endure. They needed platforms for ritual and social gathering. And they discovered that raising stones in ascending layers is stable, practical, and symbolic. We thought pyramids began in Egypt because Egypt stood in plain sight. But the Earth holds memories across every continent, and history is not kind to assumptions. The forgotten pyramids are rising again, and they are rewriting the timeline of human ambition. The story of how we reached the wrong conclusion begins with visibility. When ancient Egypt rose to power, it built with carved stone, a material that resists the weathering of time. The desert climate preserved those stones with almost impossible patience. Rain is rare, vegetation struggles to take hold. Sand buries, but sand also protects. When modern explorers first reached the Nile Valley in the 19th century, they were greeted by monuments that looked nearly eternal. Giant triangles of limestone rising out of the earth like mountains built by design. A civilization so advanced that it seemed to appear out of nowhere. Meanwhile, other ancient constructions were covered by soil, wrapped in vines or washed smooth by tropical seasons. In the Supe Valley of Peru, the pyramids were no longer sharp structures. They had been reclaimed by the earth, softened into hills. To understand their true form, archaeologists had to dig. They removed wind-blown sand and layers of sediment, revealing stones shaped by human hands. They uncovered staircases, plazas, and long, wide ramps that guided crowds toward elevated platforms. What appeared to be natural hills became intentional architecture. The structures at Corral were not small, they were monumental. The largest platform covers an area more than 500 meters across. That is half a kilometer of engineered geometry. And yet, because the shapes were softened by time, they did not resemble the iconic image burned into the world's imagination. They did not look like pyramids to those who were searching for something that resembled Giza. Archaeology is shaped by perspective. We find what we expect to find. For a long period, research funding, academic focus, and excavation technology centered primarily on regions traditionally considered the birthplaces of civilization. Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China. These regions produced early writing systems, centralized governments, agriculture, and large populations. They left inscriptions and records, artifacts that academics could date and compare. They fit neatly into the structure of early civilization, so the narrative was shaped around them. Anything outside this pattern had to fight for attention. Corral did not have writing or pottery. That alone led earlier researchers to assume it could not be advanced. They pictured prehistoric cultures as primitive. People without writing were imagined as incapable of organizing large-scale architecture. And yet, as archaeologists cleared more of the site, they uncovered evidence of city planning, residential zones, circular ceremonial plazas, complex water management, trade networks that reached across the Pacific coastline, reed fibers carefully braided into massive ropes used to transport stone blocks. Every new discovery pushed the timeline of social complexity backward. But Corral was still not the first. Far away, on a volcanic ridge in Indonesia, stood a site that defied expectations. At Gunung Padang, terraces of basalt columns rise in steps up the mountain. For many decades, locals understood the location as sacred, a place of ancient ceremony, long forgotten, but still powerful. To early archaeologists, the site appeared to be a simple megalithic structure built on natural terrain. But when researchers began to probe beneath the surface using ground, penetrating instruments and core drilling, layer after layer of intentional human activity appeared. Beneath the visible terraces lay older terraces. Beneath those terraces lay layers of compacted fill shaped by human hands. And deeper still, a surprising signature. Radiocarbon samples from organic material trapped in the construction fill suggested that the deepest layers could be far older than any known pyramid on Earth. That suggestion ignited controversy. Dating ancient structures is not as simple as carbon testing a stone. Stone contains no carbon. Scientists must rely on organic material trapped within or beneath the construction layer. Plant fibers, charcoal fragments, soil sediments that accumulated during building phases. The dates reveal when those materials were last part of living organisms. If a terrace was built using soil that had not been disturbed since ancient times, the carbon date reflects the moment of construction. But if the soil has been moved, reworked, or contaminated by later activity, the date becomes ambiguous. At Gunung Padang, researchers found carbon dates that reached back into the deep Pleistocene era, possibly as far as 20,000 to 25,000 years before the Common Era. The claim sounded unreasonable. It suggested organized construction long before the accepted timeline of agriculture. It implied that humans capable of coordinated building projects existed thousands of years earlier than previously believed. Mainstream archaeologists demanded caution. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The deeper dates are still being studied, analysed and debated, and that debate is healthy. Science advances not through certainty, but through challenge. Meanwhile, superficial assumptions about pyramids continue to shape public thinking. When people imagine a pyramid, the image is precise. 4 sides, sharp point, smooth descent toward a single apex. The Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza embodies this. It is a true pyramid, built with exact geometry. But that definition was created after the fact, shaped by what remained visible and intact. Early pyramids in Egypt, including the Step Pyramid of Djoser, did not start with perfect lines. They grew through experimentation. Smaller mastaba tombs were stacked into a larger form. The architecture evolved through trial and error. The first pyramid was not the result of a perfected idea. It was the beginning of one. Civilizations in other parts of the world arrived at similar shapes through different purposes. They did not necessarily seek a sharp peak. They needed platforms. They needed elevated gathering spaces. They needed symbolic altitude. The geometry arose from solving real problems. A stepped pyramid is structurally stable. Each stone layer supports the next. Each level shrinks slightly as it rises, concentrating the weight downward and inward. The pyramid is the natural solution to building tall with limited technology. This realization changes the narrative. Humans did not see a pyramid in Egypt and decide to copy it. Pyramids emerged because the form is efficient. It is the simplest way to build toward the sky. This idea removes the mystery without removing the wonder. The puzzle of pyramid origins reveals something humbling. Human ingenuity is not confined to one place. Creativity does not follow a single river valley. Time and again, across continents, separated by oceans, cultures discovered the same geometric truth. When a society organizes enough people to work together, when ritual and meaning demand a structure that endures, the pyramid shape appears like a memory buried in the human mind. For centuries, history told us there was only one beginning. But the earth beneath our feet tells a different story. A story that is older, wider, more human. We once believed that pyramids belonged to a single civilization. Now we understand that pyramids belong to humanity. Every discovery forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We did not fail to understand the past because the past was hidden. We failed because we were looking in the wrong direction. We focused on the monuments that remained standing and ignored the ones that time had covered. We believed the story that was easiest to see. When archaeologists began to document Peru seriously, they encountered an unsettling reality. The pyramids of Corral were not isolated. The entire Supe Valley was filled with monumental platform complexes connected by roads and plazas. The civilization did not emerge slowly. It appeared at scale. Multiple pyramid-shaped structures, some circular ceremonial centers, and extensive trade routes linking dozens of settlements. The people traded dried fish from the coast, cotton grown in the valley, and plants that traveled from distant regions. They mastered architecture without needing war. No weapons were found. No defensive walls, no imagery of conquering kings. It was a civilization built on cooperation rather than conquest. Their monuments rose not from fear, but from unity. Meanwhile, the Egyptians built monuments with a different purpose. In Egypt, pyramids were statements of power. They were tombs. They anchored a belief system where the pharaoh ruled not only the land, but the cosmos. Each pyramid was a factory of eternity, ensuring the king would ascend to the sky and travel with the stars. Egypt carved its legacy into stone because the pharaoh required eternity. The structure around his tomb had to defy time. 2 civilizations, 2 continents, 2 different motivations, yet they both turn to shapes that ascend. When we step back and see these patterns as part of a single global story, something profound emerges. Monument building does not begin with domination or conquest. Monument building begins with imagination. The shape of a pyramid is not just a mathematical solution, it is a psychological one. It represents ascent, it symbolizes connection, a wide foundation, narrowing upward, leading the eye and the spirit towards something beyond the earth. Even without shared language or contact, human beings reach toward the same geometric idea. In Gunung Padang, the terraces carry the memory of ritual. People climbed to the top not to entomb a king, but to participate in ceremony. It was a gathering space, a sacred place. The power of the structure was not in the perfection of its shape, but in the meaning assigned to altitude. Higher meant closer to the sacred. Higher meant closer to what they believed lived above the world of the living. At Corral, the platform pyramids served the community. They were stages, elevated plazas where music was played, where offerings were made, where society witnessed itself. They do not represent a single ruler. They represent an entire people. In Egypt, the pyramid represents a ruler's journey to eternity. In Peru, the pyramid represents a society's collective identity. At Gunung Padang, the pyramid, or rather, the terraced platform, represents spiritual ascent. These are not just stones, they are mirrors. When we examine pyramids not as isolated wonders, but as part of a human pattern, we begin to understand the deeper story. The earliest pyramids were not monuments to death, they were monuments to connection. They connected people to each other, they connected earth to sky, they connected time to memory. For more than 100 years, everything we thought about the beginning of monumental architecture was shaped by what survived, not by what existed. The past does not speak in loud voices, it speaks in whispers. It waits beneath soil, beneath vines, beneath assumptions. And slowly, piece by piece, layer by layer, we uncover what was always there. The discovery that Peru contains monumental pyramids as old as, or older than, early Egyptian examples does not diminish Egypt. It expands the story. The possibility that Indonesia holds even older terraced structures does not demand belief. It demands investigation. The scientific process does not bow to narratives, it questions them. The earth is full of places where time piled soil upon memory. What we assumed were hills may be architecture. What we assumed was emptiness may be the beginning of everything. The greatest misconception was not that Egypt built pyramids first. The greatest misconception was that history moves in a straight line. We imagine progress as a ladder. First simple villages, then farming, then writing, then cities, then pyramids. But the archaeological record shows something far more complex. Civilizations rise independently. They discover solutions that others discover later, or earlier, or never. Human innovation is not a single story told in sequence. It is 1,000 stories unfolding at the same time. The truth of ancient pyramids teaches us humility. It shows that knowledge can vanish. It shows that humans have achieved greatness long before we have written evidence to prove it. It shows that the world is older and more intricate than we allow ourselves to imagine. We were not wrong to marvel at Egypt. We were wrong to assume that Egypt stood alone. History is not a pyramid with a single apex. History is a landscape of pyramids scattered across continents and across time. Each one is a fingerprint of the human mind. Each one is a reminder that our ancestors did not wait for permission to imagine the impossible. When you stand at the base of a pyramid, no matter where it rises, you feel the weight of human intention. You feel the echo of a moment when someone stood on the ground and looked upward. And in that moment, they made a decision to build toward the sky. The next chapters will take us deeper into these forgotten places. We will walk through Corral, through the dry desert winds that conceal a civilization older than textbooks once allowed. We will climb the terraces of Gunung Padang and explore the evidence buried layer beneath layer. And we will question what a pyramid truly is, beyond shape, beyond geometry, beyond stone. The search for the first pyramid is not a journey across geography. It is a journey across time, a journey into the mind of humanity itself. Along the dry Pacific coast of what is now Peru, the desert appears empty at first glance. Beige dust, scattered rock, a sky washed pale by the heat. Nothing suggests that this barren land once nurtured the earliest monumental architecture in the Americas, and nothing hints that long before the rise of the Great Pyramid along the Nile, another civilization was moving stones, shaping platforms, and building structures that would one day challenge everything we thought we knew about the dawn of complexity. It begins with a river. The Supe River cuts through the coastal desert like a thin green thread of life. Along its winding banks, nearly 30 ancient settlements are arranged with deliberate intent. At the center of this network lies a city that the modern world calls Caral. Its true ancient name remains lost, buried in silence. No surviving writings tell us what its people called themselves. No royal proclamations have been uncovered. There are no carvings that announce the triumph of kings. Yet the presence of architecture speaks a language all its own. In Caral, platform pyramids rise from the earth. They do not form sharp peaks. Instead, they look like grand staircases leading toward a flat summit. Some are small, others are immense. The largest one spans more than 500 meters across. That is half a kilometer of engineered geometry, and it was created at a time when many civilizations had not yet formed villages of even modest size. Radiocarbon dating of reed fibers and plant material embedded in construction layers reveals surprising dates. Many structures at Caral were active between 3,000 and 2,600 years before the Common Era. This places them at the same age or even older than the first pyramids of Egypt. While the step pyramid of Giza in Saqqara was rising under the direction of Imhotep, workers in the Supe Valley were building monumental architecture on the opposite side of the world. Archaeologists were stunned because the Caral civilization displayed complexity without the standard markers that historians usually associate with advanced societies. There was no writing, there was no pottery, yet there was architecture on a monumental scale. There were plazas and structured pathways for processions. There were clear zones indicating social organization and planning. Caral forces us to reconsider what a civilization requires in order to build greatness. The archaeologist who dedicated her life to uncovering Caral is Ruth Shady. When she and her team began excavating the site, she found not a single trace of warfare. No arrowheads meant for battle, no fortified walls, no evidence of violent destruction. Instead, she uncovered instruments made of animal bones used to play music during communal gatherings. She discovered carved artifacts used for ritual and textiles created with astonishing skill. Archaeology often portrays early civilizations as driven by power and conflict. Caral suggests something else, a society driven by cooperation, a society organized around ceremony rather than conquest. This finding challenges one of the most deeply held assumptions in the study of civilization. We have long believed that monumental architecture emerges only after the invention of writing, agriculture, and military hierarchy. But Caral reverses the order. In Caral, monumental structures came before pottery. Collective organization appeared before defensive warfare. Religious ceremony preceded weaponry. The people of Caral were trading with distant communities, transporting cotton and dried fish along coastal routes, linking the Andes highlands to the Pacific Ocean. They connected settlements through shared rituals and a shared architectural language. At night, when torches flickered and the desert cooled, crowds would gather around sunken circular plazas at the base of platform pyramids. Tens of hundreds of people could stand in these ceremonial depressions, listening to music carried by wind instruments crafted from condor bones. Above them, elevated terraces formed stages for rituals. Archaeologists found evidence of offerings carefully placed in hidden chambers, shells from distant coasts, seeds from valleys miles away. Each object was carried with meaning. The more researchers uncovered, the clearer the story became. The people of Caral did not build for individual power. They built for collective identity. Their architecture was not a tomb dedicated to a ruler. It was a place where people came together to witness the sacred, and in that unity they built pyramids. Pyramids that rose like artificial mountains above a river that sustained life in a harsh landscape. Still, the world ignored Caral for many years. Textbooks barely mentioned it. Archaeology programs focused on the usual centers of early complexity: Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley. Even though Caral had evidence of monumental construction at nearly the same time, the academic world hesitated to accept it. Why? Because Caral did not look like Egypt. No single apex, no limestone casing, no tombs for god-kings. And because Caral lacked writing, historians struggled to assign narratives to its stones. We know Egypt because hieroglyphs speak to us. Corral remains silent. The silence made it easier for scholars to overlook. Ruth Shady once described Corral as a mother civilization. It did not conquer neighboring cultures through war. Instead, it influenced them through trade, ideology, and ceremony. It spread stability rather than dominance. This is something extraordinary in human history. Civilizations usually grow from conflict. Yet here, complexity grew from cooperation. Consider what it means that a society without writing or pottery built pyramids. It proves that the pyramid is not a symbol of a single culture. It is not the trademark of a single geographic region. The pyramid shape appears as the natural outcome of human collaboration. It is structurally stable. It allows crowds to gather at different levels. It creates a sense of ascent. Even without metal tools, the shape is efficient to build. You place stones, you add layers, you rise higher. Carroll teaches that monuments begin not with power, but with shared belief. When workers carried heavy stones, it was not because a ruler ordered them to. It was because the act held meaning. Archaeologists found offerings placed within fill layers of the pyramids, suggesting that each stage of construction carried ritual significance. Building was itself a ceremony. The structure was an expression of identity. And so we must ask a crucial question. What does it mean when a civilization builds a pyramid not for the dead, but for the living? Egypt used its pyramids as gateways for a single soul. Corral used its pyramids to gather thousands of souls in life. This truth forces us to rethink the origin of pyramids. They did not begin as tombs. They began as places where humans reached upward together. The first researchers who walked across the Supe Valley could not have known what lay beneath their feet. To them, the site appeared to be nothing more than a series of large natural mounds scattered along the riverbank. The wind shaped the slopes. Scrub plants clung to the surface. Nothing caught the eye. But archaeology rewards the patient, and slowly the truth emerged. When the first trenches were opened, the mounds broke open into geometry. Straight lines, right angles, stone stairs, terraces that had been engineered and leveled by human hands. The hills were not hills. They were pyramids that time had disguised. The excitement did not come from a single moment of discovery. It came from the accumulation of small revelations. A staircase here, a ceremonial plaza revealed below windswept sand, the remains of reed bags used to carry construction fill, their fibers preserved by the dryness of the desert. Every layer peeled away another moment in time. The archaeologists were not simply excavating a site, they were resurrecting a city. What stunned them most was not just the scale of the structures, but the planning behind them. Corral was not built from a single design. It grew in phases over centuries. New platforms were constructed, old terraces were expanded, ritual chambers were sealed and intentionally buried to make room for new ceremonial structures. The city behaved like a living organism, always changing, always adapting. To build in this way required leadership, coordination, and shared purpose. A culture does not place millions of stones without meaning. The deeper the excavations reached, the more evidence emerged of a surprisingly far-reaching trade network. Among the artifacts discovered at Corral were plant remains from regions far beyond the valley, seashells from the distant Pacific coast, minerals from the high Andes, traces of exotic fruits that grew nowhere near the Supe River. This meant that Corral maintained sustained contact with other communities across a broad landscape, not through conquest, but through exchange. Corral exported cotton. The coastal settlements used cotton to make lines for fishing nets. Those nets brought in huge quantities of anchovies and sardines. Dried and salted, these fish traveled back to Corral where they fed the population. This barter system created prosperity without warfare. It was economic harmony. Archaeologists found no signs of slavery, no shackles, no weapons of war. Instead, they found panpipes and flutes crafted from the bones of pelicans and deer. Some instruments carried patterns etched into them, decorative motifs that repeated across the site. These artifacts suggest that large gatherings took place where music, ritual, and emotion filled the air. Imagine standing in one of the sunken circular plazas at night. Torches illuminate the pyramid above. People gather shoulder to shoulder. faces turned upward. The sound of panpipes rises into the desert air, echoing off the stone surfaces of the platform. Above you, priests ascend the terraces, performing rituals whose meaning we can only guess. You are witness not to a burial, not to mourning, but to celebration. The pyramid becomes a stage, and the ceremony becomes a message. We are not individuals. We are one. This is the power of Corral, a civilization built not on force but on agreement. The most surprising element of Corral is how little social inequality is visible. In many ancient cities, the homes of nobles are large and private, separated from common residences. In Corral, residential spaces are modest and similar in scale. Even elite housing does not show the level of extravagance seen in later civilizations. Authority existed, but it was not displayed through luxury. The power was ideological, not material. The pyramids of Corral were not symbols of a ruling class. They were symbols of a belief. When radiocarbon results were first announced, many scholars hesitated to accept them. A site without writing, without pottery, without warfare, could not possibly be a cradle of complexity. People assumed that monumental architecture required a centralized state and military control. But Corral forced historians to confront their own bias. Corral showed that a civilization does not need to be warlike to be powerful. It does not need kings to have order. It does not need writing to create collective memory. To build a pyramid, what you need is shared vision. The more Corral was studied, the more connections appeared between its architecture and natural cycles. The plazas align with specific celestial events. The placement of structures appears to track seasonal changes. The civilization that built these pyramids understood the movement of stars and the rhythm of the river. They saw architecture not simply as a physical space, but as a living relationship between earth and sky. When we see the pyramids in Egypt, we see tombs. When we see the pyramids in Corral, we see community. One of the most striking discoveries in Corral was a sealed offering found inside a platform mound, a woven basket containing small carved figurines, seeds, and feathers. The offering was placed with intention and sealed beneath a new layer of construction. It was not buried out of sight. It was buried into memory, like a message tucked into the future. In another location, archaeologists found a series of burned offerings, where plant matter and textiles had been deliberately set aflame as part of ceremony. The remains were preserved beneath layers of fill, providing precious organic material that could be dated. Each layer offered a timestamp, and together they formed a timeline that stretched back nearly 5,000 years. Through these layers, the story of Corral becomes clear. The pyramids are not remnants of a lost empire. They are evidence of a society that understood harmony. They show that humans can achieve greatness without domination. They show that architecture can unite rather than divide. The existence of Corral forces us to reconsider how we define civilization. We confuse complexity with aggression. We imagine that greatness comes from conquest. But Corral teaches another possibility. Greatness can come from unity, and unity can build pyramids. The desert winds blow across Corral now, whispering over the ruins where thousands once gathered. The pyramids stand not as tombs, but as memory. They belong to no king. They belong to humanity. Across the Supe Valley, morning light reveals the outlines of pyramids, softened by centuries of wind. Corral is only one of them. Other pyramid complexes stand upstream and downstream, like a constellation drawn on land. Each one slightly different in size and orientation, but all connected by the same architectural language. Scholars realized that this pattern was not random. These settlements formed one system, one shared cultural mind. In each location, the sunken circular plaza appears like a heartbeat. The platform mound rises like a spine. The houses spread like ribs of a living organism. Corral was not a single city, it was a network. Standing at the top of one of these pyramids today, you can feel the logic of the landscape. From here, you can see the river. You can see neighboring settlements spaced just far enough apart to maintain autonomy, yet remain close enough for constant interaction. The The pyramids were placed like markers, guiding movement through the valley. In a world without writing, architecture became language. The civilization that built these pyramids understood something profound. When people gather on a platform above the ground, they feel as though they are part of something greater than themselves. When a circular plaza sinks into the earth, it brings the crowd inward, creating a focus point. Architecture shapes psychology. Carroll used that psychology to bind its people together. Nothing about Corral is accidental. In the plaza, voices resonate differently than on open ground. The circular shape creates a natural acoustic amplifier. When panpipes play and people chant, the sound rises along the walls and climbs the pyramid above. Even without written records, the stones reveal the design. The plaza is not just a space, it is an instrument. Imagine the ceremony. Hundreds gather, holding baskets filled with offerings. The air is cool and the first colors of dawn stretch across the desert. Priests ascend the terraces. A flute begins, a drum follows, the crowd responds. Together they sing. It is not difficult to imagine how such a ritual could inspire cooperation. In that moment, the individual disappears. Only the collective remains. While excavating the site, archaeologists made another discovery. Many of the platforms were built in layers, not simply repaired, but intentionally buried and rebuilt. A pyramid could stand complete for years, then be covered and replaced by a larger version. This suggests that building itself was sacred. The act of construction was a ritual. A layer of stone was not just added, it was offered. The people of Corral shaped their world slowly, stone by stone, layer by layer. Belief made visible. This idea challenges how we understand human motivation. In Egypt, pyramids were constructed because a pharaoh commanded it. Power fueled the labor force. In Corral, the motivation appears to be communal and spiritual. There is no sign of forced labor, no signs of prisoners, no mass graves. Instead, the site suggests voluntary participation. People built together. The absence of weapons reinforces this. Among the artifacts uncovered, not a single object indicates organized warfare. No battlements, no arrowheads shaped for combat, no spears designed to kill humans. This was a civilization that flourished without armies. It is astonishing to imagine a society that could reach this level of complexity without violence. Carroll proves that complexity does not require conquest. A civilization can grow not from war, but from shared purpose. This realization echoes into the present. We often assume that human progress moves through struggle and domination. But here, the evidence shows another path. Cooperation can build monuments that last for thousands of years. Music can unite. Ritual can motivate. Architecture can shape society not through fear, but through awe. As research continued, experts traced signs of Corral's influence across the region. Smaller settlements adopted similar ceremonial plazas and platform mounds. Architectural ideas spread like ripples. Corral did not conquer. Carroll inspired. But for decades, these revelations struggled to find acceptance. The world had already made up its mind. The first pyramids were in Egypt. The first civilization must have been driven by power. The existence of Corral disrupted that storyline. When scientists challenge assumptions, older narratives resist. Ruth Shady faced skepticism. Funding was rare. She worked through droughts of resources and floods of resistance. Yet she continued excavating, layer after layer, plaza after plaza, and eventually the evidence became undeniable. Corral had been active at the dawn of monumental architecture, not as an imitation of another culture, but as its own invention. Today, when researchers stand on the platform of the Great Pyramid of Corral, the view stretches across the desert to the distant Pacific. Wind moves across the stone terraces. The sound carries through the air like a memory. In that view, there is a feeling that this place was meant to guide, meant to gather, meant to unify. When night comes, the desert cools quickly. The stars emerge in thousands, bright and sharp against the black sky. If you stand on the highest terrace, you feel the height differently. You sense that the ancient builders wanted to bring people closer to the sky. The distance between earth and heaven feels thinner here. Perhaps that is why pyramids appear around the world, not because cultures copied each other, but because human beings everywhere share the same urge to reach upward. Corral is not only an archaeological site, it is a reminder that greatness does not require steel or conquest, a reminder that humans are capable of building a world through cooperation, a reminder that we often underestimate the imagination of those who came before us. The wind sweeps across the empty platforms now. Sand gathers in corners where once offerings were placed. The plazas no longer echo with music, but the stone remains. And so does the message. A pyramid does not need to be perfect to be powerful. It needs only to unite. Corral united. And by doing so, it changed everything we thought we knew about the beginning of civilization. High in the mist-covered highlands of Western Java, a mountain rises that does not behave like a mountain. At a distance, Gunung Padang appears like a natural ridge, shaped by time and weather, as though the earth has simply folded upward. But the closer you climb, the more the illusion dissolves. Basalt columns lie in orderly clusters. Terraces step upward in a geometric rhythm. Stones arranged in lines that cannot be explained by chance. Here, in a landscape where rain feeds green forests and clouds cling low like breath, lies a mystery that has begun to change the story of human monument building. Local people have long known this place. They treat the terraces with reverence, offering prayers and quiet steps. Stories describe it as a sacred site where ancient ancestors gathered. Long before scientists arrived with instruments, farmers and shepherds understood that this was not just a mountain. The stones told them so. They could feel it beneath their feet. Archaeologists reached Gunung Padang with notebooks and theories. They expected to find a megalithic site built in the late Bronze Age, possibly 2,500 years before the Common Era. The stepping terraces fit that assumption well. Simple, ritual-oriented, modest in scale, an isolated cultural artifact. But Gunung Padang did not stay modest. Early excavations revealed something strange. The stones were not sitting on natural ground. Beneath the visible top layer were more layers, terraces buried beneath terraces, fill material carefully packed. The mountain was not simply carved, it was built. Modern instruments were then brought to the site. Ground-penetrating radar swept the slopes. Electrical resistivity scanners measured variations beneath the surface. Seismic tomography, a technique that reads the density of material deep in the earth, mapped what lay hidden. The images that appeared on the monitors shocked the researchers. Inside the mountain were chambers, voids, walls, geometry, not formed by nature, but by human intention. The team did not believe it at first. They checked their equipment. They repeated the scans. The same results returned. The mountain was a structure. Radiocarbon samples were collected from organic material inside the fill layers. These samples were sent to laboratories where scientists measured the amount of remaining carbon-14. The results came back with a date near 2,500 years before the Common Era for the uppermost terrace. That placed the surface layer in the same time period as the early pyramids of Peru and near the beginning of pyramid construction in Egypt. At that point, the discovery was already remarkable. Another ancient civilization had built step terraces, independent from Corral, independent from Egypt. Another culture had chosen to reshape its landscape into a sacred platform that reached upward. But the deeper the drill cores went, the greater the shock. Beneath the upper levels, radiocarbon samples from deeper construction layers pointed to a much earlier era. The dates centered around 7,000 years before the Common Era. That was thousands of years older than Corral, thousands of years older than the Step Pyramid of Giza, older even than the earliest known monumental architecture of Mesopotamia. The world of archaeology shifted. Questions replaced certainty. Then the deepest samples were tested. Some results suggested that the core of the structure may have been created around 20,000 to 25,000 years before the Common Era. That date leaps far beyond everything we associate with complex construction. 20,000 years ago, humans were mostly hunters and gatherers. Conventional history teaches that we were nomadic, living in small groups that followed wildlife across plains. Agriculture had not yet taken root. Cities did not exist. Societies lacked the ability or the constant food supply to support large construction projects. And yet, if these deep dates were accurate, they implied something extraordinary. They implied that humans capable of organized labor, planning, and monumental architecture existed long before the accepted dawn of civilization. The archaeological world could not ignore numbers like these, but scientists also understood that carbon dating can be misunderstood. Carbon-14 dating measures the age of organic matter. It does not directly date the stone. If soil used in construction is older than the moment it was placed, it can give a date that is earlier than the building itself. In other words, the numbers show when the organic material stopped living, not necessarily when the terrace was built. This nuance led to debate. Some researchers insisted that the deeper dates reflected construction activity. Others argued that the soil could have been carried from ancient deposits elsewhere. The discussion grew intense. Journals demanded precise methodology. Critics demanded more evidence. Supporters pointed to the geometric scans. Everyone agreed on one thing: the site required more investigation. Regardless of the final interpretation, the discovery revealed a layered story. Gunung Padang did not emerge in one moment. It grew in phases. A culture built the first terraces. Later generations expanded them. The mountain was reshaped again and again, each layer a conversation across time. The deeper chambers and fill did not form by accident. They were designed. Someone had a plan. Someone understood stability, weight distribution, and stone placement. At night, when fog moves like slow water through the terraces, the stone columns catch the moonlight and reflect a pale glow. Standing there, it becomes easy to imagine rituals unfolding on the upper platforms, offerings placed, songs rising into the air. In the morning, when soft rain falls, drops gather on the basalt columns and roll into narrow grooves carved by ancient hands, and you begin to realize why this place draws so much passion. Not because the dates are shocking, because the stones feel intentional. No matter what the final radiocarbon range proves, Gunung Padang forces us to rethink what humans were doing in the deep past. Here is a place where architecture emerges without metal, without writing, without the known structure of a state, just like Corral. But unlike Corral, this structure may reach far deeper into prehistory. To build terraces up a mountain requires coordination. To place basalt columns in organized patterns requires vision. The design of Gunung Padang suggests people who understood symmetry and spatial planning. People who climbed the mountain not to survive, but to create meaning. Gunung Padang whispers a question that we have barely begun to answer. What if the story of civilization did not begin when we learned to write, but when we learned to build? Beneath the terraces of Gunung Padang, the mountain holds its secrets in silence. Archaeologists drilled deeper, removing narrow cores of earth and stone. Each cylinder of soil became a timeline, compressed into a vertical memory. When these samples reached laboratories, their layers revealed fragments of charcoal, roots, and microscopic remains of ancient plants. Some of these trapped pieces of burned wood came from controlled fires used during construction. They offered snapshots of moments when humans stood on the mountain, lifting stones, preparing fill, shaping terraces. For the uppermost platform, the radiocarbon results were clear. Around 2,500 years before the Common Era, people placed these basalt columns in deliberate rows. They carved channels into the bedrock to guide rainwater. They created leveled surfaces with retaining walls. Everything about the surface layer behaved like a ritual site used for ceremony. But when the drilling reached the intermediate layer, the dates shifted back several thousand years. Somewhere around 7,000 years before the Common Era, another group of people had been working on this same mountain. This layer contained compacted fill with a different texture and composition than the top. The stones were positioned differently. The orientation of the terraces had changed slightly. It was as if a new generation had taken an older structure and transformed it into something more suited to their time. The deepest samples surprised even the most cautious researchers. Radiocarbon dating from several cores suggested organic fragments that could predate agriculture itself, reaching far back into the glacial age. possibly as early as 20,000 years before the Common Era. If that interpretation proves correct, then humans, who were supposed to be living in small, mobile hunting bands, were instead moving up a mountain, selecting stones, shaping a sacred complex, and returning over generations. It would mean that organized construction happened long before farming, long before the pottery wheel, long before writing carved ideas into clay. This possibility invites a radical thought. What if architecture came first? What if belief united people long before agriculture did? What if monumental building began not as a product of civilization, but as the seed that allowed civilization to grow? Skeptics raised objections. They argued that soil layers can be contaminated. They pointed out that carbon-14 measures the age of organic matter, not the moment of construction. Soil can be moved. Charcoal can be older than the building that surrounds it. Some critics suggested that the deepest dates might reflect ancient materials naturally present in the mountain before humans reshaped it. This caution is not rejection. It is science doing what science must do. It refuses to jump to conclusions simply because the idea is fascinating. But even with caution, something remains undeniable. Gunung Padang is not a natural formation. It is a constructed monument with multiple phases of human activity separated by thousands of years. On the upper terraces, basalt columns stand like teeth of long forgotten giants. Each one was cut and transported, then placed upright or laid horizontally to form platforms. Experts noticed that some stones were carefully trimmed into rectangles with right-angled corners, a shape that nature rarely produces on its own. Some were arranged in circles, others formed straight paths. The stones appear to guide flow, not the flow of water, but the flow of movement. Pathways lead visitors to higher terraces, as though inviting them to ascend. When you walk upward, the mountain reveals meaning. Each step alters your perspective. The valley stretches below, the sky widens. As you climb, you understand what ancient builders understood. Height creates power. Distance from the ground creates reverence. Humans everywhere seem to respond to elevation with awe. Carol did this with platform mounds. Egypt did this with true pyramids. Gunung Padang does this with terraces carved into the bones of a volcano. The higher you climb, the more the earth disappears. At the top terrace, the world becomes silent. Wind drifts through the stone columns, carrying the scent of moss and distant rain. Birds circle below the summit, their wings slicing the air. When the mist moves, it forms slow rivers of cloud that wrap the terraces in silver. Standing at the top, time stretches. For a moment, you could be in any era. The mountain holds the same presence it held thousands of years ago. You can almost feel the footsteps of ancient pilgrims under your own. Archaeologists found evidence of fire pits at the summit, burned offerings, ash mixed in stone crevices. This was not a fortress or a place of defense. This was a place of ceremony, a place where humans reached upward. The terraces acted as platforms for ritual. The mountain became an altar. Here lies the connection between Gunung Padang, Caral, and the oldest pyramids of Egypt. All three sites share a purpose that transcends geography. They are not defined by tombs or treasure. They are defined by ascent, by meaning, by gathering. The deeper layers of Gunung Padang show that groups returned to this place again and again. They rebuilt, they renewed, they buried earlier work to create something new. That pattern mirrors what archaeologists found at Caral, where structures were intentionally sealed under fresh layers before new terraces were added. It mirrors what happened in Egypt when early mastabas were stacked into the step pyramid. It appears that humans did not simply build for shelter. They built for continuity. They built so future generations could stand in the same place and feel the same meaning. When the radiocarbon results were first announced, reporters framed Gunung Padang as a shocking anomaly. But when viewed alongside Caral, the pattern becomes clear. Monument building may not have been a sudden invention. It may have been a slow awakening, a gradual realization shared across continents, across oceans, across cultures that never met. Architecture is the fingerprint of thought. When people build something massive, it means their minds have become massive. It means they see beyond the day. It means they are thinking in centuries. The terraces of Gunung Padang suggest that people in deep prehistory shared that vision. They chose a mountain not for shelter, but for meaning. They carved ascending platforms not for power, but for connection. They used architecture to reach a place their language could not describe. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: the shape does not make the pyramid. The purpose does. Gunung Padang is not a triangle. It does not look like Giza, but it carries the same monumental idea: a raised platform, a sacred height, a structure where earth touches the sky. This challenges the boundaries we draw around the word pyramid. It invites us to expand our definition, to see pyramids not as shapes, but as actions, not as geometry, but as memory. A pyramid is any structure that uses stone and elevation to connect the human world to something beyond it. Gunung Padang teaches us that humans have always reached upward, even when history forgot them. Layers of ancient fill beneath the terraces hold another kind of information. When soil is moved and packed by hand, it leaves patterns different from those left by natural landslides or volcanic deposits. Grains align, pressure compacts. Tiny fragments cling together in a way that reveals human touch. In the deepest layers of Gunung Padang, the soil behaves like engineered fill. Not loose, not random. It shows compression and leveling. Someone prepared the ground carefully. Someone shaped the mountain from the inside out. Researchers studying the geometric scans noticed something even stranger. The core of the mountain may not be solid. The instruments revealed zones of low density that could represent chambers. Some scans suggested a room shaped roughly rectangular, buried deep beneath the terraces. If this chamber proves to be real, it will raise new questions. Was it ceremonial? Was it used to store offerings? Or did it serve a purpose we can no longer imagine? Scientists are cautious because opening such a chamber requires precision and agreement from cultural authorities. Some of the local spiritual leaders believe that disturbing the chamber would violate the sanctity of the mountain. The stones are not just archaeological artifacts, they are considered living. In this tension, something profound becomes visible. Gunung Padang is not just a scientific puzzle, it is a bridge between past and present. Archaeologists look for evidence, elders look for spirit, and perhaps both perspectives are necessary to understand what was built here. When rain falls in this region, the water flows down the terraces through deliberately cut channels. The ancient builders controlled the runoff to prevent erosion. They shaped the basalt stones so that the platforms would remain stable even in heavy rainfall. This is not crude construction, it is engineering. A terrace that survives centuries of storms requires deep knowledge of water, gravity, and stone. The builders understood their materials as if stone were a language. The path that climbs the terraces is not direct. It zigzags, forcing those who ascend to walk slowly. Every turn reveals a new angle of the valley. Every platform changes the horizon. This was not accidental. It was theatrical. The climb was meant to transform the person who made it. A ritual is not only the event at the top, a ritual is everything that leads to it. As you walk, the air changes, the wind cools, the sound of the forest quiets. Near the summit, the world below begins to vanish. There is only sky and stone. Archaeologists examined the basalt columns and discovered that many had been shaped with remarkable precision. The fractures along the length of the stones show intentional splitting. In some places, marks remain where tools once struck the surface. Stone does not shape itself. These columns were transported from a quarry not far from the mountain. The builders carried them uphill, likely using ropes, levers, and teamwork. They placed them upright in rows like pillars marking a pathway. Some were laid horizontally to form the steps of the terraces. The effort required would have been enormous. Yet the mountain does not feel like labor, it feels like devotion. Science has not yet determined which culture built the earliest layers. The deeper the dates go, the less the archaeological record can explain who these builders were. If the 20,000-year dates reflect construction activity, then the builders lived during a time when humanity was believed to be simple and scattered. This forces a re-evaluation of the timeline we use to describe ourselves. What if humans became builders before we became farmers? What if architecture was our first language of complexity? When researchers presented the deepest dates from Gunung, Padang, many academics resisted, not because they feared the truth, but because extraordinary claims demand extraordinary certainty. The scientific method is slow because it must be careful. Every assumption must be tested. Every date must be confirmed. If a structure is truly that old, we need more than excitement. We need proof. But even without the deepest layers confirmed, Gunung Padang changes the story. The presence of terraces dating to 7,000 years before the Common Era places monumental construction far earlier in Southeast Asia than once believed. The presence of even deeper human activity suggests continuity across ages. This means that architecture evolved not as a sudden invention, but as a slow conversation across generations. The terraces were shaped, then reshaped again. Each generation placed new stones over old ones, just as the people of Corral buried older structures under new platforms, just as early Egyptian architects stacked mastabas into the first pyramid. Across continents and across time, humans independently discovered that the act of building could carry memory. Gunung Padang challenges a narrative that has dominated archaeology for more than 100 years, the belief that complexity began only when agriculture created surplus, the assumption that people needed writing before they could plan, the idea that architecture came after civilization, not before it. But what if architecture is how civilization begins? To build something monumental, a community must gather, agree, and act. The structure does not create unity. Unity creates the structure. To raise terraces, people must share a vision. The act of building becomes a ritual that strengthens identity. When a society builds upward, it is not only constructing stone, it is constructing meaning. On this mountain, stone holds memory. Each terrace preserves the echo of footsteps that climbed toward the sky long before written words existed. Each layer whispers across time. We were here. We believed. Gunung Padang stands as evidence that the human desire to build upward did not begin in one place. It emerged wherever humans sought connection between Earth and the vast mystery above. It emerged wherever people looked at the horizon and imagined something more. Perhaps the oldest pyramids are not those that remain visible. Perhaps they are the ones that disappeared beneath soil and time, waiting patiently for us to find them. For as long as we have studied ancient civilizations, we have treated the pyramid as a shape, a triangle stretching upward from a wide base to a single point, a form so iconic that a child can draw it with one line for each edge. The word itself conjures sharp angles, polished stone, and perfect geometry. We imagine the pyramids of Egypt so precisely that the shape becomes a definition. But this is a mistake. A pyramid is not a shape. A pyramid is a concept, and the moment we understand that, the world of ancient architecture transforms. Think of a pyramid not as a triangle, but as the most stable way to build upward. When human beings want to reach the sky using stone, without modern technology, without cranes, without steel or concrete, the structure must be wide at the bottom and narrow at the top. The earth teaches that rule through gravity. If the sides are steep, the stones fall. If the layers are horizontal, they slide. But if each level is slightly smaller than the one below it, everything holds. A pyramid is stability expressed in 3 dimensions. It is a solution to weight. It is a dialogue between gravity and intention. When we remove the expectation that pyramids must be pointed structures, we begin to see them everywhere. The platform mounds of Corral are pyramids. The terraced summit of Gunung Padang is a pyramid. Even the earliest experimental structures in Egypt began not as perfect points, but as steps. Human beings did not invent the perfect pyramid in a single moment. They arrived there through adaptation. The step pyramid of Djoser is a perfect example. Before it existed, Egyptians buried their dead in flat rectangular tombs called mastabas. One day, someone placed a second mastaba on top of the first, then another, then a fourth. The shape rose upward, each level smaller than the one below, forming a stepped profile. No one set out to create the perfect pyramid. They simply stacked. The design evolved. Architecture grows like a thought. Early structures are questions. Later structures are answers. Across the world, on a different continent and separated by an ocean, the people of Corral built platforms with steps and ramps. They created terraces that led upward to flat ceremonial summits. They did not point their structures to an apex. They did not seek a perfect triangle. They sought elevation. They wanted to gather in a place above the ground. Their platform pyramids served the living, not the dead. They were theatres of ritual. And in Indonesia, at Gunung Padang, the pyramid is not symmetrical. It follows the contours of a volcanic ridge. The terraces curve like steps carved into the back of a giant. There is no apex. The summit is a platform, yet the purpose is the same as Egypt and Peru. The builders shaped stone upward. They transformed height into meaning. When we cling to the narrow definition of a pyramid as a pointed structure, we erase countless monuments from human history. We erase entire civilizations from the story. We mistakenly assume a shape is the idea, when the idea is much older than the shape. A pyramid is the moment humanity decided to build upward instead of outward. Why does this matter? Because the idea of the pyramid appears everywhere. Human beings developed social complexity. In Egypt, the pyramid marks the power of a ruler. In Peru, the pyramid marks the unity of a community. In Indonesia, the pyramid marks the sacred connection between earth and sky. Different cultures, different beliefs, same architectural impulse. Civilizations that never touched each other found the same solution to the same question. How do we make stone reach the heavens? When humans stand on flat ground, we feel small. When we climb elevation, something inside us changes. We see farther. The air feels different. Distance alters perspective. The pyramid takes this emotion and turns it into something permanent. A pyramid is a frozen climb, a climb that stays forever. The deeper we look into the ancient world, the more obvious this becomes. Pyramids are not about geometry. They are about psychology. They are about the human desire to rise. The shape is a consequence, not a goal. When people gather on a raised platform, their voices carry, their identity strengthens. A pyramid is a machine for unity. Imagine a community with no writing, no metal tools, no stored wealth. What could they build? Flat houses, temporary shelters, or a platform pyramid? A place that pulls people together. A place that changes how they see themselves. A place that whispers that they belong to something greater. Architecture shapes belief. Belief shapes action. Action shapes memory. We treat pyramids as artifacts. They are not artifacts. They are ideas. Ideas tall enough to change history. Ideas carved into the earth, stone by stone, thought by thought, generation after generation. When we understand this, history opens. The first pyramid does not belong to Egypt. It does not belong to Peru. It does not belong to Indonesia. It belongs to humanity. The traditional image of a pyramid misleads us in another way. We picture a finished monument, smooth-sided, perfect, complete. In reality, pyramids are never finished in one act. They are built through time, layered like memory. A pyramid grows the way a forest grows, season by season and generation by generation. Each layer reflects a decision made by people who will never meet the people who inherit their work. When ancient builders placed the first stones, they were not thinking of modern archaeologists. They were thinking of meaning. At Corral, the people sealed older structures beneath new layers. They brought baskets filled with stones and sand, then buried plazas beneath fresh terraces. This was not random. Archaeologists found ritual offerings placed before the burial, suggesting the act of sealing a structure held spiritual significance. A layer was not simply covered, it was honored. Then a new layer rose above it. Through this, architecture became a form of memory. To bury something is to remember it permanently. To build over it is to let the future walk upon the past. Gunung Padang shows the same pattern. New terraces hide older ones. Builders shape stone upon earlier stone, as if acknowledging that creation requires reverence. Even the step pyramid of Giza began this way. What we see today as a pyramid began as a simple rectangular tomb. Then smaller tombs were stacked on top. At each stage, the structure changed. The idea became clearer. The shape grew. The world witnessed the evolution of thought. This slow transformation reveals something fundamental. A pyramid is not a single moment of genius. It is a conversation across generations. It asks a society to participate in the future. When people place stones, they do not expect to see the final result. They accept that others will continue the work. Monumental architecture forces a culture to think beyond the present moment. In this way, pyramids reflect the mind of the societies that build them. In Egypt, the pyramid reflects hierarchy. Only the pharaoh reaches the apex. The form narrows to one point, one soul, one afterlife. The pyramid becomes a ladder of power. At the top rests a single person. Everyone else stands below. Corral presents the opposite logic. Its pyramids end in flat platforms large enough for the community. No apex of power, no narrowed point. The summit belongs to everyone. Corral does not isolate, it gathers. If Egypt turns the pyramid into a symbol of authority, Corral turns it into a symbol of unity. Gunung Padang carries yet another meaning. It uses terraces to guide movement. You do not reach the summit in a single vertical line. You walk side to side, slowing down, observing. The ascent becomes a journey. It is a place of transformation. Its shape invites reflection. Instead of one ruler or an entire crowd, the mountain belongs to the experience. 3 different civilizations, 3 different purposes, 3 different answers to the same question: why climb? As we study these ancient sites, we must recognize that pyramids are not mistakes of coincidence. They are solutions born from human minds that understood stone, space, and emotion. The pyramid is a universal human response to time. Time passes, memory fades, stone remains. When people build something that rises higher than the world around them, they declare that their story matters. Even the physical act of carrying stones becomes symbolic. A person picks up a block and climbs a slope or a terrace. Their body struggles, their breath deepens, their muscles burn. The work requires the body to experience the structure. The act of building becomes participation. When the platform rises, the culture rises. When the summit is reached, the individual feels changed. Modern humans rarely feel this. We live in a world where machines lift weight, where buildings appear without personal effort, where heights are reached through elevators and engines. The ancient pyramid required sweat. It required feet on stone. It required us to climb. At the top of a pyramid, no matter its shape, a person sees farther. The ground becomes distant. The horizon expands. This sensation creates meaning. The pyramid acts on the mind. It changes how a person understands themselves. When a community climbs together, belief deepens. This is why pyramids appear everywhere. They are not about death. They are not about rulers. They are about elevation. Humans seek height, not to dominate, but to feel connected to something larger than themselves. To stand above the world is to understand that the world is bigger than our daily struggle. We have misunderstood the earliest pyramids because we judged them by shape. The earliest pyramids were not defined by triangles. They were defined by what they did to the people who climbed them. A pyramid is not an object. It is an experience. Pyramids turn belief into landscape. They shape stone into meaning. They transform labor into memory. They make time visible. They refuse to be forgotten. When we recognize that a pyramid is any monumental structure that rises in layered elevation, something remarkable happens. We begin to see the ancient world as interconnected. Egypt did not invent pyramids. Peru did not invent pyramids. Indonesia did not invent pyramids. Humanity invented pyramids. The idea belongs to all of us. A pyramid is not simply a monument to the past. It is a message sent forward through time. Every stone is placed with the knowledge that future generations will see it. That is what makes the pyramid such a powerful symbol. It is an act of defiance against disappearance. It tells the universe, we were here. Human beings built this shape because it refuses to vanish. Rain can erode walls, floods can sweep away villages. but a structure that widens as it descends into the earth, becomes part of the earth. A pyramid anchors itself into the landscape. It holds its ground. The psychology of permanence connects these ancient places. In Egypt, the pyramid protects a soul. In Peru, it protects a community. In Indonesia, it protects a sacred space. Different beliefs, yet the same instinct. To build something that will remain. Even more revealing is that pyramids appear suddenly in the archaeological record, not as small experiments scattered through time, but as complete systems. In Corral, the pyramids were part of an urban plan from the beginning. In Gunung Padang, terraces were layered with intention. In Egypt, the step pyramid emerged from the idea of stacking mastaba tombs into something greater. Civilizations did not learn to build pyramids over thousands of years. They leapt into it. That leap is the signature of a shift in human thought. The moment we stopped building only for survival and started building for meaning. Architecture is frozen thought. A pyramid is thought tall enough to touch the sky. When someone climbs a pyramid, they are not just moving upward through space. They are moving upward through time. Each layer of stone is a lifetime of effort. Each terrace is a generation that believed enough to carry weight on their shoulders. When you reach the summit, you stand on the will of those who came before you. This experience is universal. People feel it even today when they climb modern structures. The act of ascent triggers something ancient in our minds. Height changes perception. The power of pyramids is not just in their scale, it is in their effect. Their geometry directs the mind upward. A flat building does not make you look at the sky. A pyramid forces you to. This is why pyramids are not really about the shape, they are about the gaze. The first pyramid builders discovered that elevation changes consciousness. The top of a pyramid is not an architectural feature, it is a state of mind. Even the earliest pyramids were not isolated structures. They were part of complex networks. Roads led to them, markets formed near them, communities gathered around them. The pyramid was not a tomb or a platform, it was a gravitational center. People returned again and again because these places held meaning that they could not express in words. Across continents, humans began shaping earth and stone into a form that allowed them to be seen by the sky. They brought offerings, they lit fires, they sang. The act of gathering transformed empty land into sacred space. Pyramids unified people who might otherwise never agree. Not every pyramid has a point. Not every pyramid has four sides. Some are stepped, some are curved. Some follow the natural contours of a mountain, but they share a single purpose. They make humans larger. If a pyramid teaches anything, it is that the desire to elevate ourselves is older than history. Long before writing, long before pottery, long before the tracking of kings and dynasties, people were building upward. Stone was their memory. Height was their language. As they climbed, they created a new kind of world. Not a world defined by survival, but a world defined by meaning. And so the question changes. Instead of asking, where was the first pyramid built, we should ask, when did humans first realize they could rise? When human beings first began to gather in groups large enough to form early societies, they faced a question older than writing and older than agriculture. What do we build for? We can shelter ourselves with simple huts. We can hide in caves when storms roll in. But these structures are for survival. They are temporary. They protect the body, not the spirit. Then, at some moment, long before recorded history, people decided to build something that did not serve survival at all. They decided to build upward. The first pyramids were not born from idle imagination. They emerged from a deeper need, something ancient and universal. Humans wanted a place where the world felt larger than daily struggle. A place where distance from the ground created distance from the ordinary. A place where people could gather and feel connected not only to one another, but to something beyond themselves. When the earliest civilizations shaped earth and stone into pyramids, they were not just building, they were expressing a new form of consciousness. Egypt, Peru, and Indonesia each reveal a different answer to the same question. What is the function of a pyramid? In Egypt, the pyramid is a doorway. In Peru, the pyramid is a gathering place. In Indonesia, the pyramid is a path. Each one uses different materials. Each one rises for a different purpose. Yet they all point to a single truth. A pyramid is not a monument to power. It is a tool for transformation. Along the Nile, the Egyptians viewed life and death as two halves of a single journey. The land where people lived ran along the east bank of the river. Across the water, on the west bank, lay the land of the dead. The west was where the sun set. The west was where souls traveled toward the afterlife and toward eternity. It is here that the Egyptians raised their pyramids. The step pyramid of Djoser, built in the middle of the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, did not begin as a symbol of perfection. It began as a tomb. But as the structure grew, its purpose shifted. The pyramid became an instrument, a tool that allowed the king to ascend from earth to the realm of the afterlife. Egyptians believed the pharaoh was a bridge between their world and the eternal. When he died, his soul needed a stone pathway to climb toward the heavens. Each level of the pyramid was like a rung on a cosmic ladder. The pyramid was a technology of eternity. Inside the pyramid, passages twist inward toward the burial chamber. The architecture guides the ritual. The pharaoh lies within, surrounded by goods for the next world. Outside, the priest performs ceremonies that activate the journey of the soul. When people today stand at the base of a pyramid, they look upward and see stone. The ancient Egyptians looked upward and saw destiny. Across the ocean in the Supe Valley of Peru, the pyramid existed for a radically different purpose. The platform mounds at Corral did not serve as tombs. No burials lie within their central walls. Instead, archaeologists found plazas designed for gatherings, terraces used for ceremony, and instruments shaped from animal bones that once played music echoing across the desert night. Here, the pyramid was not about one life ascending to the heavens. It was about the entire community rising together. At Corral, music and ritual drove construction. The circular plazas created acoustic perfection. When hundreds of people stood inside, sound carried and amplified. Voices rose into the dark. Firelight flickered against stone. Offerings were sealed within the layers of the structure, as if the people were placing their beliefs into the earth itself. The pyramid was not a monument to a ruler. It was a monument to unity. The people of Corral gathered not to worship a king, but to witness themselves. Archaeologists studying Corral found no weapons, no signs of battle, no fortifications. A society that built pyramids without warfare is almost unthinkable. It defies our expectations. We assume complex monuments require conquest, but Corral created complexity through harmony. Their pyramids functioned as community engines. They shaped collective identity. They proved that architecture can serve the living. On the volcanic slopes of Indonesia, at Gunung Padang, the pyramid takes a third form. Here, the terraces are not for burial or gathering. They form a path, a journey, a slow ascent through space that changes the person who climbs. The earliest layers beneath the soil may stretch back 7,000 years or even farther. The terraces guide movement in a zigzag pattern, forcing the climber to turn, pause, and reflect. Each platform reveals a new perspective. By the time someone reaches the summit, the world below has dissolved. All that remains is sky. Gunung Padang teaches that the function of a pyramid can be experiential. Its power does not lie in a chamber or a ceremony. It lies in the act of climbing. In all three places, the pyramid is not passive stone. It is active architecture. It shapes behavior, it shapes emotion, it shapes belief. The pyramid changes the person who interacts with it. We often imagine early humans as practical and focused solely on survival. Yet the first pyramids reveal a different truth. Before writing, before pottery, before empires, humans built structures that did not protect them from rain or cold. They built monuments to the invisible. To understand why, imagine a world before cities. Small groups gather around fires, they tell stories. They look at the night sky and wonder. They feel that something enormous surrounds them, something that cannot be seen or touched. They want to connect with it, but they have no language to describe the feeling. So they build. Building becomes the language. When humans place stones on top of one another, they express a belief that cannot be spoken. They express desire, they express longing, they express the earliest form of philosophy. Architecture becomes metaphysics carved into earth. In Egypt, that longing became eternity. In Peru, it became unity. In Indonesia, it became ascent. The function of the pyramid reveals the evolution of the human spirit. First comes survival, then comes community, then comes meaning, and beyond meaning comes transcendence. But even deeper than spiritual purpose, the pyramid served a social function. The building process created hierarchy where none existed before. Pyramids require planning. Planning requires leaders. Leaders create structure. Structure becomes society. The pyramid did not appear because civilization existed. Civilization appeared because people wanted to build pyramids. Stone transformed scattered families into organized communities. Architecture transformed vision into direction. The earliest pyramids did not arise because humans were civilized. Humans became civilized because they built together. The greatest transformation of all was cognitive. Pyramids required abstraction. To build upward, people had to imagine a shape that did not yet exist. The pyramid is a physical expression of future thinking. When we plan for tomorrow instead of today, we step out of instinct and into intellect. Building something that takes years means believing the future matters. The pyramid is belief made visible. For the Egyptians, that belief was eternity of the soul. For Corral, it was harmony among the living. For Gunung Padang, it was the ascent of spirit through movement. In each case, the pyramid served the same deeper function. It turned a group of people into something greater than themselves. Stone is heavy, yet the pyramid is not a burden. The pyramid is an invitation. Climb me. Gather here. Remember us. The first pyramids did not answer the question of death. They answered the question of meaning. Even now, when we stand at the base of an ancient pyramid, we feel the pull of its function. We tilt our heads upward. Our breath slows. For a moment, the world becomes silent. We feel small in the presence of something vast, and that feeling is the point. A pyramid reveals the scale of existence. It shows that we are part of something larger. It tells us that the world is more than our footsteps. The first pyramids were not monuments to the past. They were messages to the future. Messages carved in stone, spoken across centuries, that say, we were here. We reached upward. We believed that life was more than survival. Long before steel, long before written plans, long before armies marched across territories and declared ownership of land, people were shaping stone into monuments. They did not have bronze chisels or iron saws. They had hands, ropes made from fiber, wooden levers, and stubborn endurance. Yet with these simple tools, they built structures so massive that modern engineers still pause when they see them. These builders did not possess advanced machines. They possessed something far more powerful: organization. The greatest misconception in archaeology is that ancient people needed empires to build great works. We assume pyramids require taxes, armies, and kings with absolute authority. We imagine that without bureaucracy, massive projects cannot happen. But the oldest pyramids contradict that assumption. Corral, for example, flourished without war. No weapons, no fortresses, no defensive walls. Yet it produced monumental architecture that rivaled the early structures of Egypt in scale and ambition. Corral shows that complexity does not require conquest. It requires agreement. Imagine a community gathering at dawn. The desert is still cold from the night. People carry baskets of stone and clay. They climb ramps and deposit the material layer by layer, slowly raising terraces. No overseers stand above them with whips. No soldiers surround them to force cooperation. The structure grows because the community chooses to build. Each stone placed is a promise that tomorrow they will return and place another. The absence of war in Corral is not an accident. Archaeologists catalogue thousands of artifacts from the Supe Valley. They found musical instruments made from animal bones, ceremonial offerings, textiles, fishing tools, weaving equipment, gourds used to transport water. They found spindle whorls and nets. They found beads and baskets. But they did not find weapons meant for battle. A society that builds pyramids without sword or spear reveals something extraordinary. Architecture can be born from peace. Egypt followed a different path. The labor that built the pyramids near the Nile came from structured communities, not enslaved masses as popular mythology once suggested. Workers lived in nearby settlements. They were fed, housed, and cared for. The stones were quarried and dragged using sleds lubricated by water to reduce friction. Thousands of people participated, not because they were forced to, but because they believed the pharaoh connected them to the divine. Building was a sacred act. To place a stone was to participate in eternity. At Gunung Padang, high in the mountain air of Indonesia, nobody imposed an empire. No inscription claims a king. No relief announces a ruler. The terraces are shaped by devotion and patience. Stones were quarried and transported up steep slopes. Workers used levers and ropes. They arranged basalt columns with surprising precision, guiding the water flow across the terraces to avoid erosion. They understood hydraulics without formulas. They understood gravity without mathematics written on clay. All three sites reveal a deeper truth. Knowledge spreads through practice and observation, not only through writing. People watched how stone reacted when placed against other stone. They learned that some shapes resist collapse. They learned that terracing creates stability. They learned that a broad base supports weight better than a narrow one. They discovered engineering through effort and iteration. In Egypt, mathematicians observed the stars to align pyramids with true north. They used ropes with knots tied at intervals to measure distance. They divided land into plots after each flood of the Nile. That skill evolved into geometry. Geometry was not invented in a temple. It emerged from the need to build and measure. The Egyptians did not describe their mathematics with the symbols we use today. They felt mathematics through the resistance of stone. Carroll used a different knowledge system. They understood the wind patterns through the valley. They placed their circular plazas near natural air currents so that sound would carry. They positioned terraces to catch the rising sun. The design allowed the land itself to speak. They did not compute angles with numbers. They felt them with ceremony. Gunung Padang reveals an even more ancient kind of knowledge. Builders shaped the terraces to follow the mountain's natural incline. Instead of forcing geometry onto nature, they merged geometry with nature. They used the landscape itself as a structural foundation. They built with the mountain, not against it. No empire required, no army required, only intention. One of the most persistent myths in popular culture is that ancient people received help from visitors beyond this world. Strange lights, lost civilizations, beings from the sky. These ideas persist because we underestimate early humans. We assume that people without writing must have lacked intelligence. But intelligence does not require writing. Understanding does not require records. The pyramids did not need impossible technology. They needed cooperation. When people gather to build something that will outlive them, they enter a different state of mind. Construction becomes ceremony. Ceremony binds the group. Binding creates coordination. With coordination comes organization. With organization comes architecture. Civilization is not built from technology. Civilization is built from shared purpose. Even in Egypt, where pharaohs commanded labor, the pyramid was more than a demonstration of authority. It was a demonstration of belief. The workers placed stones because they wanted the pharaoh to succeed on his journey to the afterlife. They believed that if the pharaoh reached eternity, he would guide the Nile floods and ensure the survival of the kingdom. Building the pyramid was not obedience, it was survival. The pyramid was the machine that kept the world in balance. In Carroll, the pyramid was the machine that kept society in harmony. Ritual gatherings strengthened relationships. Music unified strangers. Festivals created loyalty. When the people climbed the terraces at night and played panpipes into the darkness, they were participating in a social technology. Architecture became a conductor. Stone channeled emotion. Platform heights changed the way people looked at one another. On the summit, everyone shared the same horizon. At Gunung Padang, the mountain itself became the machine. The people who climbed it experienced transformation. The slow ascent, the turning, path, the terraces unfolding one above another. Each level altered the sound of wind. Each platform changed the rhythm of thought. The builders engineered not only stone, but perspective. Technology is not always metal and gears. Technology can be ritual. Technology can be stone. The earliest pyramids prove that technology begins in the mind, not in the forge. The idea that humans needed empires to build greatness distorts our understanding of the past. The first pyramids arose in places without war. They were built by people without kings. They were shaped by communities that valued unity more than domination. We often think power creates monuments, but monuments can also create power. A pyramid demands planning. Planning demands structure. Structure forms leadership. Leadership becomes society. In this way, architecture does not emerge from civilization. Civilization emerges from architecture. Carroll built pyramids first, then grew into a culture that influenced surrounding valleys. Egypt organized labor for pyramids, then developed stronger centralized authority. Gunung Padang formed terraces, then became a spiritual center. In each case, the intention to build created the conditions that shaped the society. We often say that humans discovered civilization, but the truth is simpler. Humans built it, stone by stone. The idea that pyramids required advanced technology fails to recognize that human beings are themselves advanced technology. Every person who lifted a stone was a machine of muscle and decision. Every conversation around a fire, every agreement to meet at dawn and carry baskets of clay, every shared meal between laborers was a form of organization. Civilization begins in the moment people choose to work together. That choice is more powerful than any tool. When we examine the first pyramids, we do not see empires. We see intention, we see cooperation, we see human beings discovering themselves. The pyramid does not rise because of authority. It rises because people believe in something larger than themselves. They believe that meaning can be built, that time can be shaped, that stone can become memory. In the end, the first pyramids do not tell a story of rulers or machines. They tell the story of humanity learning to build the invisible. Throughout history, we search for patterns. We want every mystery to have a single origin. When we find two similar ideas in distant places, our instinct is to assume a shared source. We imagine travelers crossing oceans before recorded history. We picture one civilization teaching another how to shape stone into a pyramid. We want one beginning, one explanation. But nature rarely works that way. Evolution does not produce the same animal in every environment through imitation. Similar environments produce similar solutions. Human civilizations follow the same rule. The ancient world was not a single story. It was many stories unfolding at once. Egypt, Peru, Indonesia. 3 cultures separated by oceans and tens of thousands of kilometers. 3 cultures with no trade routes linking them, no shared language, no shared gods, no shared kings, yet all 3 built pyramids. How? The answer is simpler and more profound than contact or influence. They arrived at the same idea because they faced the same challenge. How do we build upward with stone? When humans want to reach height, when they want to mark the land with meaning, when they want a structure that can survive time and weather, there is only one design that nature allows: a wide base narrowing as it rises. Build too steep and the structure collapses. Build too narrow and it sinks. Gravity teaches us the shape. A pyramid is not a revelation. It is gravity made visible. The idea arises not from copying, but from problem solving. Just as birds evolved wings in different species through necessity, humans discovered pyramids through engineering logic. You do not need to know that pyramids exist elsewhere to discover one. You need only to confront weight, height, and stone. In Egypt, the pyramid emerged from the tomb. In Carral, it emerged from the gathering place. In Gunung Padang, it emerged from the mountain itself. 3 different worlds produce the same architectural instinct. not by imitation, but by convergence. Independent invention challenges a comforting myth. We imagine a moment when civilization began. We want a single origin point, a cradle, a birthplace, but the archaeological record shows something different. Civilization did not start in one place and spread. It started everywhere people reached beyond survival. Across continents, humans discovered agriculture, writing, music, and monumental architecture independently. The pyramid is one of these discoveries. At Caral, the earliest pyramids appear around the time when Egypt begins experimenting with step tombs. But no ships crossed the Atlantic. No caravans crossed deserts that would take months to traverse. The people of Peru were weaving cotton nets, not building boats meant for deep ocean exploration. Their world was defined by rivers and valleys, not open sea. They had never heard of the Nile, yet their pyramids rose as high as some early Egyptian mounds. In Southeast Asia, Gunung Padang developed terraces that may reach back thousands of years before Caral or Egypt. No records exist. No text describes the builders, but the terraces themselves speak. They whisper of a vision that required no written word. Why do cultures reach the same idea? Because the pyramid is the simplest path to permanence. Because height changes perspective. Because humans are drawn to the sky. When people stand on a raised platform, they feel the world expand. When they gather on a terrace and look outward together, they become a community. When they build something that rises beyond the height of any tree or house, they claim the landscape itself. The pyramid becomes the anchor of identity. Independent invention is not coincidence. It is a reflection of shared psychology. Consider astronomy. Without telescopes, ancient people watched the sky. Stars became calendars. The movement of constellations became stories. Civilizations used the sky to track seasons long before they used writing. If you stand in the desert and watch the sunrise for enough mornings, you begin to notice patterns. If you plant crops, you begin to understand timing. If you gather people on a raised platform and look toward the horizon, you begin to feel that the sun and stars speak. Caral aligned some of its structures with astronomical events, not with star maps drawn by mathematicians, but with instinct. When the sun rises behind a terrace on the longest day of the year, a festival begins. When it rises elsewhere on the shortest day, another ritual marks the change. The people of Caral used their pyramids to orient their year. Egypt did the same. The alignment of pyramids to true north is not an accident. The Egyptians studied stars that circled the pole. They marked the point that did not move and oriented their pyramids toward it. The pyramid became both a tomb and a compass. It pointed toward eternity. Gunung Padang also reflects celestial thinking. The terraces face specific directions. The summit acts as a platform to watch the horizon. Whether it aligned to stars or to sacred mountains, the purpose is the same: to connect earth with sky. When different cultures confront the same sky, they find similar meaning. The myth that pyramids required lost worlds or forgotten technologies distracts from the genius of early humans. The builders did not need help from elsewhere. They needed only curiosity, intention, and time. To carry stone is not mysterious. To place stone with meaning is. The idea that humans could not have built pyramids on their own is rooted in a misunderstanding of intelligence. We picture the past as primitive, but intelligence does not evolve slowly like tools. Intelligence is ancient. The mind we possess today is essentially the same mind that walked the earth 20,000 years ago. The capacity to imagine, to plan, to believe existed long before writing. Ancient people were not waiting for civilization. They were already capable of it. When humans build pyramids, the structure reveals the mind that created it. The base reveals collaboration. The terraces reveal intention. The summit reveals belief. These ideas are universal. They do not require contact between civilizations. They require imagination. Independent invention tells us something profound. Civilization is not the story of one river or one kingdom. Civilization is the story of a species learning to think in futures instead of moments. The pyramid is proof. When stone is shaped upward, the present sacrifices itself for the future. People build not for themselves, but for those who will come after. They commit labor not for shelter, but for meaning. That shift from survival to significance marks the birth of civilization. Independent invention shows that this shift did not happen once. It happened again and again. The pyramid is not a cultural artifact. It is a milestone in human consciousness. The moment people decided to build upward, they crossed an invisible threshold. They stepped from the world of instinct into the world of intention. Stone carried meaning across oceans without ships, not by contact, not by influence, but by convergence of thought. 3 continents, 3 civilizations, 1 idea. We rise. At the end of the last ice age, the world looked nothing like it does today. Human beings walked across land that is now underwater. Entire coastlines stretched far beyond our maps. The ocean level was not what we know now. It was lower by nearly 120 meters. Think of that amount not as a number, but as an entire drowned world. Valleys that once held villages are now seafloors. Rivers that wound through fertile deltas are now silent channels beneath waves. If ancient people built along the coast and coastlines later drowned, their structures would not remain on land where archaeologists could find them. They would lie beneath the ocean, out of reach, forgotten. The oldest chapters of human civilization might not be hidden beneath deserts or jungles. They might be hidden beneath the sea. When the last ice age ended, the world warmed. Glaciers melted, oceans rose. Slowly at first, then suddenly, as if the planet exhaled an enormous breath. The water moved inland, swallowing shorelines. Villages that once looked out over land soon looked out over rising water. The sea advanced 1 meter, then 2, then 10. Entire worlds vanished in silence. The ocean does not warn. It moves. If people built early monuments on coastlines and those coastlines sank beneath the rising sea, we would expect the earliest architectural experiments to disappear. Wood rots, clay dissolves, even stone can crumble over thousands of years of waves. The archaeological record we study is not the full story. It is the fraction that survived the flood. This is why discoveries like Gunung, Padang and Coral feel like anomalies. They sit inland where dry land preserved them. But what about the civilizations that built along ancient shores? What about structures that now lie beneath water? This question has stirred archaeologists for decades. Every ocean floor scan, every underwater anomaly, every strange shape that looks too regular to be natural ignites speculation. Some of these shapes turn out to be illusions of geology. Some reveal collapsed settlements, others remain unexplained. In the western Pacific near the island of Yonaguni, divers found a series of underwater stone formations, massive flat surfaces, right-angled edges, steps that appear carved. Some scientists argue that the features formed by natural fracturing of sandstone. Others believe humans shaped them and that rising seas drowned the settlement. The debate continues because the site offers hints, but not clarity. Yet what matters is not whether Yonaguni is artificial or natural. What matters is that the ocean hides secrets we have barely begun to explore. Farther west, near the coast of India, sonar scans revealed what appear to be ruined structures under the waters near the Gulf of Kambat. Some researchers believe these could be remnants of settlements that existed during the end of the Ice Age. Fragments of pottery and tools were recovered. Radiocarbon analysis suggested the material could be older than any known city. Critics point out that currents can move artifacts, and that dating sediment does not prove the age of a structure. The scientific method demands caution, but the possibility remains open. When we examine the map of the world with Ice Age coastlines restored, a new pattern appears. Many of the most suitable locations for early civilization now lie underwater. Fertile plains extended beyond what we believe to be the edge of continents. Rivers that now empty into the ocean once continued across land for kilometers. The earliest humans would have settled along these vanished deltas. They would have fished, traded, built, lived. And when the sea rose, their lives vanished beneath it. The planet has erased most of its earliest architecture. Only the structures that stood away from the flood remain. This is why sites like Gunung Padang, which sits inland and high in elevation, can preserve deep time. This is why Caral, located in a valley isolated from the sea, survived. This is why the Egyptian pyramids endure. They were built on land that never drowned. But what of the structures that were not built inland? Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey reveals another side of the story. It is not a pyramid. It is older than Caral, older than Egypt, older than nearly every monumental structure on land. Radiocarbon studies date it to around 9,600 years before the Common Era. The site holds massive stone pillars arranged in circles. Some reach heights of 5 meters. They are carved with animals and symbols. These stones were shaped by people who had not yet discovered agriculture. They still hunted and gathered, yet they built something monumental. They gathered to carve stone for reasons far beyond survival. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe shocked archaeologists. It forced a reversal of the timeline. If architecture predates farming, then farming did not create civilization. Belief did. It was not crops that first united people. It was purpose. It was gathering. It was meaning. People came together to build, and through building they became something larger. Later, they grew crops to support the gathering. Architecture created civilization. Civilization did not create architecture. After the Great Ice Age floods, the people who gathered at Göbekli Tepe buried their structures under layers of sediment. The burial was deliberate. The site was not abandoned. It was sealed. The reason remains unknown. Perhaps the ritual ended. Perhaps the structure had served its purpose. Perhaps burying the monuments was part of the ritual itself. We see the same pattern at Caral, the same possibility at Gunung Padang. Structures built, structures buried, structures rebuilt. It appears that early humans did not create monuments only to use them. They created monuments to remember. Now, imagine an unknown culture that built along the ancient coast, a culture that shaped platforms or terraces, or even early pyramids. When the water came, they may have sealed their structures with offerings, just as Göbekli Tepe was sealed. Then the sea rose, and everything disappeared beneath the water. Thousands of years later, sonar picks up shapes on the ocean floor. Divers swim toward the forms. They find stone where nature seldom places stone. They find shapes too clean to be accident, and yet too eroded to confirm intention. The mystery grows. What we see on land today is not the beginning. It is what remains after the water took the rest. We assume that pyramids emerged from complex societies. But what if monumental building predates the societies that later wrote history? What if the first pyramids were lost beneath coastlines we no longer see? Humanity is older than our records. Civilization is older than our cities. Our minds are older than our memory. When we dig into the earth and when we dive into the ocean, we are not discovering the past. We are rediscovering ourselves. The oldest pyramids may not be the ones still standing. The oldest pyramids may be the ones we have not yet found. The world beneath the waves waits for us to remember. History is not a straight line. It is not a clean staircase with each step leading neatly to the next. It is a fractured landscape shaped by memory and erosion, by discovery and loss. We talk about the past as though it were fixed, as though the story of humanity had already been written and all that remains is to read it. But every excavation, every dated fragment of charcoal, every stone revealed beneath a collapsed layer of sediment reminds us that history is not a book. It is a draft, and we are still writing. For more than a century, textbooks carried a familiar image. Civilization began in one place, on one river, in one continent. The sequence was simple. Villages formed. Farming began. Writing appeared. Then came monuments, eventually pyramids. And because the oldest standing pyramids we could see with our own eyes were in Egypt, Egypt became the first chapter. The Great Pyramid of Khufu rose above the desert as proof of genius. Its precision, its massive scale, its orientation to the stars seemed like the natural beginning of all monumental architecture. Every museum, every classroom, every documentary repeated the same origin. Pyramids began in Egypt. Yet when radiocarbon studies dated the Step Pyramid of Giza, the numbers told a different story. Around 2,667 years before the Common Era. A marvel, yes, but not the first. Corral in Peru revealed platform pyramids that appeared 100 to 300 years earlier. Radiocarbon analysis from reeds and woven baskets, sealed within the fill layers of Corral, consistently point to dates between 3,000 and 2,600 years before the Common Era. A new contender, a civilization with no war, no armies, no conquest, yet it built pyramids almost at the same time as Egypt. This alone was enough to challenge the timeline. But Gunung Padang in Indonesia disrupted everything. The upper terraces date to around 2,500 years before the Common Era. The middle fill layers date to around 7,000 years before the Common Era. And the deepest layers, if confirmed, may reach as far back as 20,000 years before the Common Era. Even if those deepest dates reflect only the age of the material used, not the construction itself, the possibility forces archaeology to confront a new idea. Monument building may have existed during the final phase of the Ice Age, long before farming, long before pottery, long before writing. The timeline that once looked like a ladder now looks like a constellation. On a whiteboard in a research laboratory, the dates appear like stars in the darkness. Not aligned, not sequential, scattered. Gunung Padang deepest layer possibility, somewhere near 20,000 years before the Common Era. Göbekli Tepe, around 9,600 years before the Common Era. Early Caral Pyramids, around 3,000 to 2,600 years before the Common Era. Step Pyramid of Giza, around 2,667 years before the Common Era. Different cultures, different eras, different continents. The story we once believed was linear, but the evidence now tells us something else. Civilization did not begin in one cradle and spread outward like ripples. Civilization ignited in multiple places, like sparks catching dry grass. The common assumption was this: first farming, then villages, then cities, then writing, then monumental architecture. But the discoveries disagree. Göbekli Tepe shows people building megalithic stone circles before farming. Caral shows people building pyramids without writing and without war. Gunung Padang suggests that monumental architecture might have begun long before the societies we recognize as civilized. It means that architecture did not emerge because civilization existed. Civilization emerged because humans decided to build. In every old textbook there is a line. It claims that monumental architecture requires a centralized authority, a ruler, a king, a bureaucracy to organize labor. But there is no king at Corral, no palace, no army, and yet the pyramids rise. There is no inscription at Gunung Padang, no record of a ruler or a dynasty, and yet terraces ascend the mountain. History assumed that power comes first and pyramids follow. What if it is the opposite? What if pyramids create power? What if building is what unites people into a society? When archaeologists present evidence that challenges long-held assumptions, the reaction is rarely immediate acceptance. Science is not shaped by excitement, it is shaped by caution. Every extraordinary possibility demands extraordinary proof. Researchers verify radiocarbon samples. They question soil context. They compare results with stratigraphy. They debate. They argue. They challenge one another to find the truth. Controversy is not a sign of uncertainty. It is a sign of rigor. Gunung Padang might not rewrite history, but it forces us to look again. When we stare at those terraces and the layers beneath them, we feel the timeline bend. We are taught to imagine human progress as a climb, small steps leading to greater ones. But what if the climb is not gentle? What if the climb is abrupt, sudden leaps? Civilization does not always grow gradually. Sometimes it appears like an idea that enters the mind all at once and refuses to leave. Caral appears suddenly, no slow lead up. One day they are building baskets and nets, the next, pyramids. Göbekli Tepe appears suddenly. No gradual evolution of architecture, one moment small camps and stone tools, The next carved pillars standing in circles taller than a human being. Gunung Padang appears suddenly, deep terraces shaped in a mountain without the support of farming or writing. This is not linear progress. This is ignition. Ideas spread not through contact, but through necessity. Humans everywhere crave connection to something greater than themselves. When their tools were simple and their lives unstable, the one thing they could not control was time. A monument is a defiance of time, a way of saying to the future, we lived, we shaped stone, we believed. Egypt believed in eternity through the pharaoh. Corral believed in unity through ritual. Gunung Padang believed in ascent through experience. Different purposes, same impulse. Now imagine the moment a young student opens a textbook 20 years from now. Instead of seeing a single pyramid as the beginning, they see a global timeline. They see platforms in Peru, terraces in Indonesia, tombs in Egypt, stone circles in Turkey. They see humanity rising together. History shifts slowly. Not because truth is stubborn, but because evidence must be undeniable. The scientific world cannot adopt a new timeline simply because it is exciting. It must be validated by repeated dating, supported by contextual layers, challenged by peer review, strengthened by excavation. But the future is already moving. Layers are being tested, new surveys are underway. Drone scans, LiDAR mapping, and refined radiocarbon calibration are revealing structures once hidden by jungle, rock, or earth. The more we search, the more we find. Not because the world is changing, because we are finally looking. The pyramids of Egypt remain breathtaking. They remain genius. They remain engineering perfection. Nothing can diminish them. But they are not the beginning. They are the evidence of a world already deep into the experiment of building upward. The idea that only Egypt could build pyramids diminishes the rest of humanity. The idea that the first monument must belong to a single culture is a relic of an older mindset. The new evidence tells us something liberating. Genius is not rare. Genius is universal. When we see the timeline rewritten, we are not just moving dates, we are expanding identity. We are acknowledging that humans everywhere, in every climate, in every era, have been capable of wonder. The past is larger than our memory of it. Every time we uncover a buried terrace or a sealed plaza or a forgotten stone, we add a sentence to the story. And that story no longer begins in one place. It begins wherever humans decided that survival was not enough. We are not descendants of a single cradle. We are descendants of countless sparks. Civilization is not a river. It is rain. Before pyramids touched the sky, before cities rose from dust, before writing captured thought in symbols, there was a moment when humans looked at empty land and imagined form. It did not begin with tools. It began with vision. The first architect was not the person who learned how to stack stone. The first architect was the one who imagined that stone could mean something. We often picture early humans as trapped by survival. Hunting, gathering, moving, struggling. But something happened that changed everything. People stopped thinking only about the next day and began thinking about the next generation. They began to shape time. A pyramid is not just a building. It is time made visible. It is effort multiplied across lives. It is the ancient world's most powerful expression of belief in the future. When the first humans carried stone for the first pyramid, they knew they would never see it finished. And still, they carried. Civilization begins at the moment people do work whose outcome lies beyond their own lifetime. To build a pyramid is to accept that the future matters. At Corral, they built without motives of conquest or empire. The plazas and step platforms were not tombs. They were places where music echoed and people gathered. Their pyramid complexes lacked fortification. No walls, no weapons. These people chose harmony over dominance. Their architecture became a stage on which society performed itself. Ritual was not decoration, it was infrastructure. At Gunung Padang, they shaped terraces out of a mountain. They climbed the slope day after day, carrying basalt columns that weighed more than any single person. No inscriptions identify a ruler. No carvings declare authority. The builders did not sign their work. They offered their strength quietly to the earth. They built a monument not to a king, but to an experience, a journey from the bottom of the mountain to the top. At Saqqara in Egypt, architects used limestone instead of basalt. They measured with ropes. They aligned with the stars. They extended their reach beyond the horizon, believing their work supported the path of the soul. The step pyramid of Giza was not only stone, it was a promise that death was not the end. 3 different civilizations, 3 different meanings, 1 insight. Monumental architecture is not built to store bodies or stand on land. It is built to hold ideas. The oldest pyramids were not created by advanced machines or ancient forgotten empires. They were not instructions from the sky or traces of supernatural intervention. They were human. They were created by people who could imagine what did not yet exist. The explanation is not aliens. The explanation is us. We have underestimated early humans for too long. We have assumed that intelligence follows technology, but technology follows imagination. A person without writing can be brilliant. A person without metal tools can shape stone with patience that bends time. If you want to know the mind of an ancient architect, do not look at what they built. Look at what they believed. Carol believed in community. Gunung Padang believed in ascent. Egypt believed in eternity. Pyramids were not the start of civilization. They were proof that civilization already existed in the mind. Somewhere in prehistory, a group of people stood on a landscape with nothing on it. No walls, no towers, no trace of meaning. The land was silent, and someone said, "Here, build here, lift the earth, shape the world, give form to what we feel." That was not an act of construction, it was an act of will. Every stone placed was a declaration. We are more than this moment. We are more than survival. We are more than creatures who wander. We build, we intend, we imagine. We are architects. And when the structure rose high enough that a person could climb it and stand where no one had stood before, the horizon changed. A new perspective emerged. The people saw farther, and perhaps for the first time they understood what it meant to rise. Architecture did not begin with knowledge of materials. It began with a desire to be seen by the sky. The first humans who built pyramids did not need metal, they needed purpose. When we look at pyramids today, we see stone, but when the builders looked at them, they saw the future. They saw their children and their grandchildren looking at the same structure and knowing that they were part of something larger. The oldest pyramid is not only stone, it is a shift in the human mind. It is the moment when we stopped being bound by the ground beneath us and began to shape it. Pyramids are not monuments to gods or kings. They are monuments to possibility. The next time you see a pyramid, whether in Egypt, Peru, Indonesia, or anywhere else, remember this. That shape exists, not because of the tools people had, but because of who they were. They were not waiting for the future. They were making it. The oldest pyramid is not where we expected, because the first chapter of civilization was never about one place. It was about one idea. We rise. When humans placed the first stone, they were not building a monument, they were building us.